I'm so sick of running as fast as I can.
Wondering if I'd get there quicker if I was a man.
And I'm so sick of them coming at me again.
Because if I was a man,
Then I'd be the man. Okay, guys, welcome to another episode recording. Today we are talking about Taylor Swift. Round of
yay!
applause. So that little expert we just read off was somehow not our own words. Shocker, I'm really sorry. It was from Taylor Swift's song The Man off her Lover album. And this song kind of addresses our little episode today. It's kind of everything we're going to be talking about. So we thought it'd be really cool to start off with kind of analyzing some of those lyrics. Are you excited?
Yeah, it's just a really good song that talks a little about the struggles that women might face. And yeah, it's just a really relatable song.
Mm-hmm. So I kind of read up on the analysis of the music video part of it because the music video kind of accentuates the lyrics too. If you haven't listened to it or watched the music video, you should go do that so you kind of understand what we're saying. But if not, it should be fine. So the premise of the music video is Taylor Swift is dressed up as Tyler Swift, which is her male counterpart. And the music video kind of addresses how differently Taylor Swift and Tyler Swift are treated in the same scenarios. It starts off with the music video kind of mirroring the Wolf of Wall Street scenes, where it's kind of the guy going like in front of the crowd, and then he's like being all big boss moment, and that's a little insight on how powerful women are treated worse than powerful men are. So this guy was being like rude to his employees and whatever, but they still respected Tyler Swift because he is Tyler Swift. But a 2015 study found that men in the workplace feel more threatened by female managers than male bosses, and in turn, they are way more aggressive towards them. So, this kind of beginning of the music video shows to that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely right. I think a lot of times men show a little bit of a more competitive side and feel threatened by powerful women like Taylor Swift. And sometimes in Taylor Swift's career, too, there have been men who felt that way.
We're getting into that, aren't we? Yeah. So, through the kind of Wolf of Wall Street metaphor, parallel connections, he's trying to prove that, hey, this guy is getting treated much better for the things that I was doing just because he's a guy, which I think is like a really important topic that, we really aim to address more on this podcast too. So it's really cool to see. Another scene that follows is a scene where this guy is coming onto a tennis court and he's super confident. He's like thrusting his hips, right? But then something goes wrong. Like the game doesn't go his way. And now he's like crying on the floor and like having a tantrum. This kind of parallels um, kind of how women are supposed to be less emotional and how they're less allowed to be emotional because they are seen as over emotional. This is trying to reference Serena Williams. I think she got fined 17,000, don't quote me on that, for arguing back to an umpire who accused her of cheating. And she got super heavily fined for that. But there have been other men in tennis who have been yelling at the umpires, been like breaking their rackets and like cussing people out, and they've gotten treated a lot less severely. So there's also like a really big difference there.
Yeah, and Serena Williams, too, as a woman of color, has also faced different
Mm-hmm.
barriers than maybe some white men who are playing tennis because they're just seen as like you have to get through more barriers to get to where someone else might be with the type of connections making in that field. That's
Mm-hmm.
definitely part of it too.
So again, that's another like double standard that Taylor Swift is really trying to point out. And there's also a scene where Tyler Swift is with his daughter at a playground, and he's like on his phone taking a call, and she's just like there, and then he's just on the call ignoring his daughter. But the moment he puts it down and picks up his daughter, all these women in the playground with their kids who were like paying attention to their kids suddenly come over to him and like applaud him, and there's a sign above his head that's like world's best dad just because he put the phone down and picked up his kid like all the other moms were doing, which points out the double standard there. I'm going to say double standard a lot this episode because that's kind of like what we're talking about, but how men are held to lower expectations and how they can get away with doing less than a woman is expected to do.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of something that's slowly changing now that we are in a time that's just a little bit further than when Lover came out. But that's definitely true. Like in a movie, I don't know if you watched it, it's called Marriage Story. There was a really good monologue by Laura
I,
Dern that talked about how Basically, dad can make mistakes, but a mom can't. And dads can be drunk all the time while a mom can't. And just the expectation of that moms have to always be there, but dads don't have to because they're already expected not to. So I think that's something really important that's
Hmm.
been addressed and kind of been worked on over the years.
I think parenting, especially with kind of sexism, is a really raw topic too. Because I have a lot of people talk about how when their moms were watching them, it would just be expected, but when their dads were watching them, they'd be applauded for babysitting when it's their kid and they should be doing that in the first place. Because, like, as you said, it's seen as like women are supposed to be doing that, but men aren't. And also, I see like single moms get like reprimanded for being a single parent as if it isn't the dad's choice to like not be there. So there are definitely a lot of double standards within parenting, and that just goes way back, like family culture and like how things fit in place in like families. It goes way back, and that's something again, like you said, is slowly starting to change, but we're still not there yet. And then another last moment I had listed from the music video is you see Tyler Swift wake up with a woman, clearly, like after they slept together, and he's walking out, and there's like a hallway of people like high fiving him, like cheering him on, and this is Taylor Swift trying to show like, hey, a guy with who is able to sleep around with women. He's like applauded. He's called like a Riz Lord, He's like, oh wow, you're so great at getting these women, and you're like an alpha male. But when a woman does it, when Taylor says when she has exes, then they're seen as like whores or like sluts, and they're being like reprimanded for that. But a man can get away with it super easily.
Yeah, like being already touched or not pure. And definitely in the music industry too, the industry that Taylor Swift's in, obviously, that's something in pop culture has been shown a lot that women might have to sleep with their bosses or higher ups to get up in
Mm.
their industry, especially in the music industry or pop acting. But that's also something where they're slut shamed after. So that kind of power dynamic there is something that needs to change too.
Yeah. And another big thing I think is kind of related to that is purity culture. Again, kind of how I was talking about how women are like looked down on if they like have body count at all. Like, have you ever been to a school health class and they give you a tissue and then they like crumple up this piece of paper or whatever, and then you open it up and they're like, see, it's not the same as before. No matter how many you try, it can never go back to the original. And I feel like that's definitely a thing that's rooted already from childhood where women are told like, hey, you can't be giving yourself out like this because it'll never go back. But then men have really, none of my male friends that I know have gotten that lecture before, when every single one of my girlfriends have said, oh yeah, I got told that exact same thing with like a tissue box or like a piece of paper, and or even like a lollipop, you
I think
know
it's just a
but
more dangerous thing for women in that regard because just biologically women will suffer more than men. Um, but yeah, the purity culture is a little bit different, I think.
yeah, I get what you're saying, but it's also just like the concept of what they're teaching is like, don't give yourself out because you're not going to be the same. And then I went to Christian school, right? So the lecture that came with it was more like your future husband is
Oh,
not
I
going to
see.
like you more. And I think that kind of lecture that we're telling young girls is kind of what Taylor's trying to combat here. Where it's like men are praised for something that women should be ashamed about.
Yeah, it should definitely be more of like a be safe, be careful for yourself and not
Oh, I wish
so
that was what it
your
was.
man will love you type of thing.
Mhm. So throughout this little kind of four of those scenes I mentioned from the music video, again, watch the music video if you haven't. Really good, touches on like the theme of our podcast really well. It just kind of shows how many double standards there are. And this is just four, right? Four that she chose that reference pop culture, that reference moments that have actually happened. And is Taylor trying to kind of say, hey, women and men, especially in the entertainment industry, which we'll get into, are treated so differently. So that kind of double standard is kind of what we're going to be talking more about as well.
Okay. Then something I have is that Taylor was talks a lot for her song Better Than Revenge, where she says she's an actress better known for the things she's done on the mattress, which is a reference to her ex-boyfriend Joe Jonas's new girlfriend, Camila Bell, and it kind of attacks and brings down Camila Bell, and that's an lyric that people wanted to be changed because it's not very woman supporting women. Even though I believe she was only around, she was young when she wrote that. And to be fair, she was in the world spotlight when she was only like 20. And that definitely affects how she might see herself, like the inner misogyny part of it. So even though that lyric was bad in that regard, I don't think it's as bad as a lot of other men have written and haven't been caught out for. Like you were saying with the double standards thing, something in an article where they compared Robin Thicke's song Blurred Lines to Better Than Revenge. And it has a lot of allusions to rape, date rape.
Wow.
So one of the lyrics was, try to domesticate you, but you're an animal. I know you want it. And that song was only caught out.
Never, never adjusted it.
I think it was caught out eventually, like a year after release, but that was already after it's been played worldwide, and they didn't really get anything done for that. It's not like they had to change the lyrics.
If you guys don't know, Taylor Swift did end up changing the She's an Actress better known for the things she's done on the Matches line in the re-recording of Speak Now Taylor's version. So she did take that criticism, and I think she's definitely grown since Speak Now, which again, as Val mentioned, she was like what, 19, 19, 19. So definitely, as you mentioned, in the internal misogyny kind of aspect of it, when you have all these things, these like misogynistic things spoken at you, and they're kind of pressed into your brain, a lot of women, not even just her, like not even industry, will say things like that, which kind of further misogyny. That you kind of realize, hey, it's not their fault that they've been raised believing that that's true.
Like feeling like as a woman you have to compete with other women or your worth
Mm,
is attached to a man, that is definitely something that's been rooted in a lot of people's lives, something that people have grown up to believe. So I think the woman in competition idea there is definitely part of the reason why she ended up writing that lyric.
mm-hmm. And another thing is Taylor also talks a lot on like recordings and like interviews about, again, sorry, I keep saying this word, double standards in the entertainment industry. She talks about how people will question if she wrote her own songs, and they'll only talk about her personal life or her dating life instead of her music. And when they do talk about her music, it's like, hey, this is co-produced by a man, or it's co-written by a man, and that's all they really talk about. And they kind of try to diminish her songwriting from that. And she also has a really good quote where she says, "There's a different vocabulary for men and women in the music industry. A man does something, it's strategic. A woman does the same thing, it's calculated. A man is allowed to react, a woman can only overreact." So I think that's a super powerful way of her trying to say that's her experience. That's a lot of women's experience, really. I'm sure you can relate to, Isabella, about how women are always going to be seen as like evil or like calculated or like, yeah, for those kind of things.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's definitely part of the reason is how much women have to compete for certain roles. Like there might be this many positions for a man back then, and there's only these many positions for a woman. So then women
Mm-hmm.
are taught I have to compete with another woman to get that position. So it's kind of evolved into more of a I have to compete with this woman for
Mm-hmm.
this boy, or something that Taylor Swift says in a lot of her songs. It might not apply to everybody, but even in school, like I have to compete with this girl for this grade, maybe. So we always see it as women competing with other women while we should be supporting each other because we
Girlhood.
are the,
Yes.
yeah.
And I know she's also mentioned from there where she says that women also have a harder time competing with men as well, obviously. But she mentions how all the women she knows have had to rebrand like 20 times to stay relevant. And she says that most are quote unquote sent to the elephant graveyard by 35. So all these women that she knows in the entertainment industry, these other singers, had to keep like innovating and keep having to push the limits of what music is just so they can stay relevant. Taylor Swift herself, she has what, 10 albums now, multiple genres within them, just so she can keep innovating and keep relevant. Whereas you don't really see, of obviously some men have done this too, but not all male singers have to go to the extent female singers do to stay new and to stay relevant. So I think that's also a really good point with the competition.
Yeah, it's definitely the lookism part of it too. Like people want to see a very pretty and young female singer or female actress. It's very rare to see someone like, for example, Sia, who's like in her 40s, I think. It's very rare to see somebody after 35, like you said, in the entertainment industry in that way, like being a main character type of role. I think it's definitely changed a lot in some parts of the entertainment industry, but in music especially, it's still like that.
Mm-hmm. And she also has talked about how even when she is relevant, people will find a way to kind of diminish her success. So she's talked about how people said that it was fine to infantilize a girl's success, and she's kind of talked about this when she was saying when she was first starting out and first getting popular, and she was like what 16 writing debut. They're like, oh, it's kind of cute that she's having like these little hit songs. But she says as soon as she was super successful and it became competitive to these men, and she's selling out stadiums, breaking the records, getting top 10 spots on the Billboard Hot 100, then suddenly it's not as cute anymore, and her success is suddenly going to be diminished and looked down on and put down. And again, people say things like, oh, it's probably the male producer or whatever, and they try to diminish her music that way. And I know one particular instance is we all know little Kanye West speech where he goes up, grabs her trophy, and interrupts her speech. And she talks a lot about this and how traumatizing it was for her, because she felt like her accomplishments were getting just kind of tossed away.
Yeah, definitely she's worked really hard for that, especially in that incident specifically. So that must have been so hard for her. I think Kanye did apologize for it, but that was still like a horrible thing to do.
I did not know he apologized, actually. All I know is he went on to call her a bitch in one of his songs. So, I gotta look more into that. Yeah, Taylor gets a lot of hate, and that also translates to her fans. If you don't notice, you'll get a lot of guys who will say things like, "Oh, she probably listens to Taylor Swift," talking about a girl, or "Of course you listen to Taylor Swift, like of course you're a Swiftie." And I think that's kind of like a weird little piece of culture where it's like, why is it kind of wrong to stand a woman artist or a female artist, and why is this like something that girls should feel they have to be ashamed of? I have no idea. Actually, I don't have an answer to that.
I think Taylor Swift, in some ways, overcame that because Taylor Swift is one of the biggest artists of our time. So people are used to seeing her name everywhere, I think, at this point. But earlier in her career, I think that was a bigger thing.
Yeah, I'm sure. She's her career is still growing. Every time I feel like, oh, she's reached her peak, she keeps growing. Each album gets somehow more attention than the last, which is insane because every one of her albums is best selling.
Yeah, listening to her Taylor's version songs and comparing them to maybe what she sang 10 years ago, it's amazing how she still stayed at the top of her voice. And
Mm-hmm.
that's really impressive because a lot of times for young artists, their voices really change over the years. So,
Mm-hmm. And
sure.
I'm really glad that she was able to inspire like so many other young female writers. Like I know Olivia Rodrigo has said multiple times that Taylor is one of her like biggest inspirations, and you can kind of tell that in her songwriting too.
Mhm.
And I'm just like really glad that even though Taylor gets all this criticism from guys, sometimes even other girls, that some girls do find her super impactful and like inspirational and have caused them to be able to like Olivia go out and have their own careers like that. So I think that's something she should definitely be praised for.
Yeah, listening to Taylor Swift music in your room, like when you get up in the morning to get you all pumped up, it's just something that so many girls do to kind of feel empowered and ready to start your day. And I think that's just such a beautiful thing.
And I think something about Taylor that makes her so popular, my little theory, is she has a song for everyone, right? Her songs are personal to her and they kind of sometimes they'll tell stories of her own life. But I feel almost every girl can relate to them in some way. If not one song, you can relate to another song. There's gonna be a Taylor Swift song out there that you relate to. Like that's it's just impossible not to. And I feel
Yeah,
like because of that, she's such just a storyteller that way.
and she's sang in so many different genres too. Like our one friend who wasn't interested in Taylor Swift at first, but then we introduced him to some rock songs like Haunted. And then he was really impressed by it. So yeah, like you said, there's definitely something for everybody.
Mhm.
And even if you don't like Taylor Swift, that's okay. There's a lot of other artists out there
Mhm.
for you to listen to. It's just Taylor Swift is one of the biggest
Following
ones.
up on this thread, he's always like, "No, Taylor Swift's so like cringe," and then we're like, "Okay, listen to Speak Now," and then he's like, "Oh my god, I've been looping Speak Now for the past 2 hours," and we're like,
Yeah,
"Yeah,
I feel like
yeah."
part of it isn't always because oh, she's a woman, so I don't want to listen to her. It's also the thing when something gets too popularized, you don't want to
Mhm.
listen to it because you think you want to be different. I think that's part of it too. Why
I think the
people.
moral of this episode is you're not too cool for Taylor Swift. Nobody is too cool for Taylor Swift. Go listen to Taylor Swift. Oh, another thing about her writing about her life and her stories is she gets a lot of criticism for writing about her exes. And this is something I brought up a lot on how people were saying, like, women are not allowed to have higher body counts or like not allowed to have past relationships, but also just writing about them. She gets criticized saying, like, oh, her music is all repetitive. It's just about guys, it's just about relationships. First of all, like we just said, not true at all. But Taylor's brought up. She's like, "Hey, how come none of these people criticize Ed Sheeran? They don't criticize Bruno Mars, who also write a lot of good, by the way, music about their exes. But it's only Taylor who seems to get this massive criticism over writing music about relationships."
Yeah, because I remember asking my parents, like when I was maybe 6 years old, why are all songs about love or heartbreak? And they said it's a universal experience. Everybody can relate to it. That's why. So that still makes sense for Taylor Swift. She's not an exception to that. She can
Mm-hmm.
write about it too because she's experienced.
And I'm not sure why. If even if she was writing all her songs about exes, what's the issue? She found something that works for her. Her fans love it. Clearly she's always trending somehow, and it just does well, and it's not hurting anyone. I don't think she's ever super duperly. Oh my god, that's not a word. Mentioned her ex in like a really really bad light, or like said anything like super like defamatory.
I
Like a
mean,
lot of these male
others
rappers are saying worse, but she gets more criticism.
yeah, like I can understand it for her being such a popularized artist. They want to protect maybe young girls from hearing lyrics like the one I mentioned for Better Than Revenge, lyrics that may support the idea that women should not support women or your worth is attached to that of a man. But her music has transformed throughout the years, and as we mentioned before, she's learned so much from those experiences, and she's always honest about it when she talks about it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And although I do mourn the original Better Than Revenge lyric, because despite it being a little bit misogynistic, it was very catchy. But I'm glad at the end of the day that she changed it, because that shows that, again, like you said, she is listening to our criticism. Because no woman is ever going to be completely free from sexism. No woman is ever going to be free from internal misogyny, right? So I'm glad that she's being able to take accountability for that and able to change. And I know a lot of people have also come to criticize the song "You Belong with Me" just because of its content. It's kind of like, oh, look at this girl, and I'm like this, and I'm better than her. Um, but again, the song is so old, and if you listen to some of her newer stuff, I feel like she is kind of moving away from relationships. If you listen to
I think it
Midnight,
just shows how she's matured as a person
mm-hmm.
and how she's kind of unpacked these things that she's held within herself, her baggage. And it's just the way that she's matured in music because, sure, at that age, maybe all she could write about was her experiences with relationships. But as her experience and her accomplishments came on in the industry and she's confronted more things other than that, she's able to write things that are not only about heartbreak. So I think that's great.
Mm-hmm. And I know aside from her music too, the industry itself has been not very well against her. Wasn't there like a court case you mentioned to me a bit ago? You want to elaborate on that?
Right, yeah. So the David Miller case. Um Basically this guy groped her allegedly at I think a photo op after the Red World Tour. And
Right? She was so young.
yeah, she was really young. And then he said, "No, I didn't do that." But she wanted to take him to court and show people that you can say no. because she thought that if he would do that during a photo op, which is a high profile place,
Oh,
people are looking, people are taking photos, then what would he do to a young girl who is a lesser known artist and who might not be surrounded by all of these photographers? So that's kind of her reason for doing that. She only sued him for $1. It was symbolic, is what she said, while he sued her for $3 million for ruining his career. So at
what
the
career?
end,
I've never heard of this guy. There was no there was no career.
getting a job after, actually, at a radio station. So his career was not ruined,
His
but
career is not ruined.
he definitely had to own up to what he did to some extent. She did win the $1,
I'm glad
and
for her.
the
She
whole
deserves
court
that.
case. It was really big. The court case talked a lot about how he was saying, "Hey, my hand was not there." She was saying, "Yes, it clearly was. I felt you groping my ass." And then people asked her, "Oh, when somebody gropes you, the dress will like be crinkled up. Why wasn't the front crinkled up?" And she said, "Because my ass is in the back of my body," which I thought was really funny and classic Taylor comeback.
I think it's
Oh, and
also classic.
her mom was like bawling during the court, by the way. And I think it's just so great that she's standing up for young women and what they might have to go through in her industry
Mhm.
and just showing people that it's not the way you should advance in the entertainment
And I think
industry.
it's so sad that people were trying to disprove her allegations by saying the dress thing. And I know, like as you mentioned, like the kids, like, oh, my career is gonna be ruined. That's a very common thing for fans or guys to say when somebody, a high-profile celebrity, is accused of sexual assault, and they'll be like, oh, you're ruining his career. But the career is never ruined. I cannot name somebody whose career has been ruined. Okay, maybe more people are more critical because they raped someone, but they still oftentimes get to play on the same sports team or still have listeners or streams and still have fans supporting them. So, a little off topic, but this is my little rant that no, their career is not going to be ruined. The woman's life is probably ruined. She'll probably never be the same again. Your career is going to be fine.
I mean, definitely in some cases with cancel culture and Me Too, it can get extreme. And there are definitely exceptions where the careers are ruined. This is just not one of them. That's
Never.
something,
It's usually not
it's
one
just
of them
not one
either.
of the
It's not
exceptions.
one. And but like you also mentioned very near the beginning of this, how sometimes young girls are pressured and like sleeping with their higher ups to get further in the industry. I'm glad Taylor kind of pulled out this court case to say like, hey, this isn't actually a thing that is normal and is super like predatory. And I think that shows, like as you mentioned, to a lot of young artists that this isn't something that is normal and shouldn't be something that is normal. Because I'm sure it is. I'm sure if this guy is bold enough to do it at a photo op, then I'm sure it is something that's super normal. And I'm glad she's finally saying, "Hey, no, it isn't. Don't do that."
Exactly. Yeah, and when you look up to somebody, especially celebrities, you want to know that they got through on their own, right? You don't want to see, oh, they slept with this person, that's how they advance, because that just teaches young girls that that's the only way that they can advance if they want to go into that industry, which is not something we want young girls to believe. So definitely just knowing that Taylor Swift is able to be this idol for everybody
This
and
massive
show
international
people
superstar.
that you can do it by your own merit, that's already amazing. Like, despite anything that she's been accused
Mm-hmm.
of, that is just amazing for her.
Oh, I completely forgot about this. But during her quote unquote reputation era, where it was Kim Kardashian who ruined her career for a big while, where she had like faked a phone call voice memo or something. I'm actually not sure the full extent of it. I forgot to look this up. And people were hating on her so bad. Her career was actually almost ruined, by the way. People were calling her snakes. Horrible time to be a Taylor Swift fan. We're like spamming snakes in her comments, calling her a liar, calling her a snake, calling her like a bitch, calling her all these bad things. And she just disappeared from the internet for a while. That was a case where her career could have been ruined. And this really sucks. This was with the help of Kim Kardashian, who was it Kim Kardashian? It was a Kardashian.
I
I
don't
think
know.
it was.
I've never heard of this, so this is
You never
very
heard of
interesting.
this?
No.
This is huge. This is a huge one for her. And she obviously came back on her own, but it was super tough, right? She had to show that she was still like innocent and she could climb her way back up to where she was. And she did, and she's even bigger than she was now during the Reputation era. But because of that, yeah, her career has taken some hits, some huge hits. But I'm glad she's showing young women like you can come back. You don't have to let these like external forces stop you from doing what you really want to do.
And showing people that there is that support system for you as well.
Mm-hmm.
You're not alone in this, but you shouldn't be climbing the wrong way.
Mm-hmm. And a Taylor Swift can go through all of that, right? All that in the industry and sell out international tour dates a year ahead and still only come to Canada when it's Toronto, by the way. So I haven't talked about this again. She released the Canada dates earlier today, and then she has 6 Canadian shows. All 6 are conveniently in Toronto, which I am not in. But if she can do all that, right, and sell out international dates worldwide after everything she went through, I think that's such a strong message to young women. It's like, don't let these double standards, don't let this hypocrisy, don't let that get you down.
Yeah, it shows them that you can do it if you put your mind to it.
Yeah, so again, while Taylor said there's a lot of controversies with her like feminism, I think she is a really good symbol of what you can do